a wave that long and we coiled it, it would oscillate 1,000,000 times in the frequency of radio. In microwaves, you're oscillating 1,000,000,000 times per second. And by the time you get into infrared, you're at 1,000,000,000,000 times per second. So when we get into the visible light spectrum, we're operating and oscillating at numbers that are so high in frequency. So what's happening as this frequency increases is, again, the force of gravity becomes so strong that any mass that becomes in contact with that frequency, photons or even solid mass, the frequency of that mass becomes so high that the mass becomes, in essence, lighter. In other words, it doesn't have that sort of feeling of weight to it, the feeling of mass. So it starts to accelerate. So this is starting to tell us what's happening in a black hole in the center of our galaxy. If we look at a black hole, first of all, it appears black. And most scientists think that it's just a tremendous force of gravity in the center of the black hole. And they're right. But what this theory shows is there's something else happening in a black hole. We're seeing oscillations per second going so fast, and that matter, mass, photons, are actually starting to come in contact with this field. And at this point, which is known as the event horizon in a black hole, matter is accelerating beyond the speed of light. And if matter accelerates beyond the speed of light, and we view the universe, we take pictures with cameras, when we look at a black hole, you can't see anything because it's oscillating faster than the wavelengths with which we see light with our brains. So we get a void. A picture of a black hole shows it to be black because it's oscillating too fast. It's going beyond the speed of light, so therefore it just appears black. If really we had cameras and wavelengths in our brain capable of seeing into higher frequencies and energies, a black hole would actually be luminous. It would just be a greater increase of energy, according to this theory. So as we get smaller and smaller and smaller in the orbits, the oscillations per second start to go into numbers that the highest number ever counted is a googol. A number per second that we can't even imagine. So at that point, if we could make a spacecraft that could oscillate with energy vibrations anywhere near this point, we would see that spacecraft be capable of producing energies that could allow it to conquer the speeds of light. So what does all this have to do with the UFO? Look at the waves themselves. I really had no idea what I was going to find. But before we go to there, I'm going to explain a few more things about the gravity beyond light speed theory and how this model is not only showing us what's happening in our galaxy, but also is showing what's happening in our microuniverse. In theory, this is just a theory. It's a theory on paper. It would have to be demonstrated and proven to be correct. One experiment done by a physicist named Dr. Randall Mills at a company called Blacklight Power, if we go into the microuniverse, assuming that on my galaxy clock here, the distances I'm using, the size of this clock is about 6 million miles across, which is not actually that large in comparison to even our solar system. If this was Earth here and the Sun is 93 million miles away, we can see if this is 6 million miles, it's not that big of an amount of space to be having these orbits moving through. But assuming we're getting way into here, and this is the size of an atom, and this is the proton in the middle of the atom, and these orbits here are layers in which an electron orbits around the proton. The hydrogen atom has one proton and one electron. And we all know that hydrogen is a source of fuel and is a source of energy. Dr. Randall Mills took, using a chemical process, actually shortened the distance between an electron's orbit in a hydrogen atom. In other words, if an electron was orbiting here, he caused it to jump to, say, here. What would happen if we could change the orbit of an electron from here to the energy in a hydrogen atom? According to this theory, the answer is obvious. If the electron jumped from here to here, you would see an increase in the frequency of the oscillation of the electron around the proton. Here, if we go into an innermost wheel, if we move into a closer wheel to the center of the proton, you would see an increase in the oscillation of the electron around the proton, and therefore an increase of energy. Well, in Randall-Mills experiments, once he shortened the distance between the electron's orbit around the proton, that's exactly what happened. The hydrogen atoms started to produce more energy in the form of actual heat and in the form of actual energy waves. Although Randall-Mills doesn't have the same explanation, when I applied his experiment to the galaxy clock, I saw that it fit in perfectly. So even on a micro level in the micro universe, we can see the same thing happening. An increase in oscillations represents an increase in energy. So now I'm going to explain a little bit about going into this process of how electromagnetism increases as oscillations in electric fields increase. We're going to look at a little bit of a different diagram. The evidence of magnetism increasing as oscillations of photons, which are just electromagnetic waves, can be demonstrated in part by the properties of an electromagnet. If we take a conductor rod such as copper or steel, and we wrap windings of copper wire around the conductor and run an electric current through the wire, the conductor rod turns into a magnet. This is because as electromagnetism through the wire oscillates around a nucleus, the conductor rod, energy in the form of magnetism, gravity, is produced in the vortex. The energy in the form of magnetism produced is relative to the frequency with which the current oscillates through the wire around the conductor. As the number of windings of wire increase around the metal conductor rod, with the same constant speed flow of energy moving through the wire, the energy in the form of magnetism gravity increases. This is part of what is happening in the galaxy clock. As photons of light waves oscillate into smaller and smaller orbits, the energy produced in the vortex in the form of magnetism gravity is increasing. But in the galaxy clock, electromagnetism moving at the speed of light as a constant can move into infinitely smaller and smaller orbits into the microcosm even, and the frequency of oscillations per second can also increase towards infinity. Thus, magnetism gravity is also going to increase towards infinity. Mesmerized by the amazing pulsing waves from the STS-75 tether incident UFOs, I decided to take a look at the waves frame by frame. I felt they might reveal the propulsion system of these giant UFOs. I once asked Dr. Glenn Seaborg, who shared the Nobel Prize with Macmillan for the discovery of plutonium, former chair of the Atomic Energy Commission under Presidents Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, authorizing all of the nuclear weapons testing at the Nevada test site, about anti-gravity generators being developed by alternative energy developers. He answered me and said, if anyone could build a gravity generator, they would have an energy source far beyond nuclear fusion, and I don't believe anyone is doing anything like that yet. On a huge TV screen with a flawless S-video VCR, and with the help of Steve Orkland, an amazing zero-point energy scientist, we identified and freeze-framed the first pulse of the UFO as it was passing over the top of the 12-mile-long tether. We were both astounded and in such awe I could barely speak. It was a profound moment in this investigation. We were looking at what appeared to be a gravity wave with a steep spiral radiating from the UFO right out of the Phase 2 galaxy clock. It was the clear signature of a powerful gravity wave that was clearly bending light into the shape of the incredible magnitude of the wave. The wave radiated right out of the black hole in the center of the UFO, and we could see clearly that by the extreme steepness of the wave coming out of the black hole, that the hole was the point where gravity produced in the UFO's propulsion system was faster than light, and because our eyes and cameras could not produce a signal that fast, it appeared black as the mystery that beckoned me with the knowing that the UFOs were capable of utilizing such high-frequency gravity waves that they could conquer the speed of light and visit us from another star system. The Phase 2 pulse was equally astounding because it showed an outward pulsing ring, another phenomenon that happened in the galaxy clock when each inner ring completed an oscillation.